Hello, my little ponies. This is Not Life again, bringing you the late edition of an affliction of the heart by, I believe it's an anonymous Pegasus. Come on, man, tell us your name. I know this is long overdue. I recently started closing, but there will be an update video coming out fairly shortly after this uploads. So who knows? Without further ado, let us begin. Kuno awoke in the room. The wooden ceiling was the first thing she saw. Her head was still buzzing from the magic depressant, and she felt groggy and listless. The changeling rolled off the bed with a low groan, landing shakily on her hooves and then shaking her head a few times to try and clear it. Her room had a new addition, a chair and desk, with a hoofful of books spread across it. Kuno made her way over to the desk, pushing the books around to glance at their titles. There were adventure novels, romance novels, fiction and non-fiction, all different kinds of books. Daring do was a recurring theme. It was utterly bizarre. Kuno didn't know what to make of it. A single royal god had taken her into custody, and was apparently keeping her in his own house. These were not normal self-furnishings, she was sure. She had spent as much time as possible as far away from jail cells as she could. But a wooden room with newly installed one-way window, a view to a garden, and a collar? These were not normal imprisonment conditions. And it would take a unicorn to install the one-way window. That much Kuno knew. So Warden had gone to all the trouble of making up this room to keep her contained. If the royal guard at large knew of her position, and her existence, then she was certain she would have been taken to the Camelot Palace for public execution, or banished from Equestria at the very least. And yet, here she was. If Warden was alone as her jailer, then he would have to contract some pony out to make his one-way window. It would take a lot of trouble to go through. It would my tongue my back. It was a lot of trouble to go through to keep a single changeling contained, and now there were books for her to amuse herself with, as though Warden was concerned about her mental well-being as well. Her ruminations were interrupted by the appearance of a shadow at her feet, and before the touch came at her shoulder, she knew it was coming. A notepad was thrust under her nose. "I am leaving today, for the day. Do not try to escape." Kuno pondered on suggesting the guard on the suggestion the guard just made. Do not try to escape. The header of all the notes. But under that was another sentence. You will be allowed to use the rooms while I am away. Is there anything special that you need? Kuno blinked at that, looking up at the guard. Special? The guard nodded once. As in, dietary? The changeling queried, confused. A tentative nod was her answer. Kuno gave a derisive laugh. You can start by finding me a willing pony to take love from. Other than that, no. I will slowly waste away and die, no matter what you feed me. You can get me a better collar, though. One with a bell. The guard looked her up and down, his expression clearly confused, wondering if she was being sarcastic or truthful. Before he about-faced and walked away. About face! Means turn around. I love military jargon. Kuno took a few steps forward and laid her hoof on the door in time to hear it vibrate. Clicking locked. The changeling rolled onto her back, wiggling slightly and splaying her wings out. She calmed her breathing and then closed her eyes, concentrating. It was odd enough not to be able to hear anything, but she could feel the vibrations of the guard's hoofbeats against the wooden floor through her sensitive wing membranes. Oh, that is a very nice trick. Ugh, one moment while I get my computer to stop screaming at me. She heard him walk down the hallway, pause, and then come back. By the time the door opened, Kuno had rolled over back onto her stomach and was looking up at the guard expectantly. The hoof that was not holding his spear held the tether outstretched. Kuno gave a long, suffering sigh and reached up to her throat, finding the padlock there was open. She stepped closer to the guard, cooperating, allowing the tether to be clipped into place. The guard snapped the padlock shut, and then held the other end of the tether. She was led out into the hall, trailing behind Warden. He ambled up to a post near the bathroom, and then hooked her tether to the iron ring. And then Warden carefully walked past her, sliding his helmet on and walking out the front door. Kuno very quickly discovered that Warden was meticulous in his preparations. With her tether just outside the bathroom, she could reach the facilities in the bathroom itself, some of the kitchen, and the table at which they had eaten at dinner. And if she stretched as far as she could just touch one of the windows with a hoof. The drawers in the kitchen had been emptied. The cupboards in the bathroom were bare, except for a vial containing magic suppressant pills, some kind of sadistic joke. And everything that she could use to fashion into a weapon or perhaps some kind of tool to free herself had been removed. So instead, Kuno did the only thing a changeling could possibly do in her position. She ran a hot bath, and lazed around in it with a magic suppressant pill tablet to take the edge off her pain. While indulging in her amphibious side, Kuno tried the soap, scrubbing it across her form and then vigorously rubbing her chitin to make sure that the scent was removed. After that, it was just lazing. The half tablet she took had mulled her senses, and dulled the pain that had been building in the base of her wings and behind her eyes. Time was meaningless in that, and before she knew it, the flat tip of a spear was waking her up. Kuno's eyes fluttered open, and she blinked at Warden, giving a grunt of acknowledgement. Awkwardly, she slipped and slid to her hooves, the water slippery with the soap in it. A steadying hoof from Warden helped her crawl free of the tub, and then a towel was thrown over her shoulders. Some vigorous rubbing across her form got her dry, and she was pleased to find that the towel came away clean, with just the faintest hint of brown at its edges. Warden was still watching her from the doorway. He waited for her to be done, and then led her to the table. Once more, she was given bread and stew, a rather bland meal. Kuno sat at her bedside, at the side of the table, chewing on her bread and stew glumly. Wait, how do you chew on stew? I'm pretty sure he wouldn't like that. The tether was just far enough away that she had to lift the center of it off the floor, and it was putting a constant slight pressure on her collar that was infuriating. Every little sway of the tether she could feel quite accurately, or as a pull or tug on her collar. Kuno finished her meal first, and then sat there, watching the Warden as he finished his own. "So, why are you keeping me here?" Kuno asked of the guard. His ears pricked upward, and he gave her an uncomfortable look before resuming his meal. "You know, the silent treatment won't work very well on me, since I can't hear shit." I can't work today because my pen is falling up. "You know the silent treatment won't work on me. You know the silent treatment won't work very well since I can't hear shit anyhow," Kuno stated, chasing a crumb across her plate. Warden looked up at her again and pursed his lips. He paused in his eating and then pushed away from the table. And they yawned and ate everything. No. Coming around with the notepad in hoof again. He scrawled something on it, across it, and then pushed it under her nose. Found you in the field. No, really. Kuno asked in a sarcastically odd tone. The Pegasus frowned, and then wrote something else down. You're a changeling. Your powers of deduction are astonishing, Kuno said with a shake of her head. Couldn't leave you in the field. Well, that's understandable, Kuno admitted, tapping a hoof against her chin, and then waving that same hoof at the house. But then, this isn't a jail, not a proper one. You're the only one guarding me, and this, she plucked at her collar, is not standard prison attire. Why are you keeping me a secret from the rest of the guards? Warden looked dismayed at that, and how easily the changeling could put two and two together. She can do math. There was a long pause, and he hesitated over each word as he wrote out a short sentence. They'll kill you. Kuno nodded at that. Most likely, yes. Can't let them. Sure you can, Kuno stated with the wave of a hoof. It'd be quite easy, in fact. The thud of the Pegasus's hooves against the table made no sound to Kuno, but she felt the impact in her bones. The Pegasus scowled deeply. His eyes narrowed. Are you really that concerned about me? Kuno asked glumly. I'm just a changeling. Surely your conscience could abide a single changeling dying. Warden frowned deeply, and then shook his head, scrawling a single word across the notepad and tossing it over his shoulder. Can't. Kuno peered at the single word on the paper, frowning to herself. So, you're just going to keep me here? Forever? You realize that you're killing me as surely as if you turned me into the guards. Into the other guards. The Pegasus returned to his seat, and finished his meal, and began to finish his meal. He gave her a curt nod, looking unhappy. So, let me go, Kuno said. An empathetic shake of the Pegasus's head was her only answer. Kuno growled, pushing at the table with her hooves and turning her head, effectively ending the conversation. It was several long minutes before she felt a tap on her shoulder, and turned towards him, narrowing her eyes. Murderer? The Pegasus pursed his lips, and then shook the end of the tether in her face, motioning her towards her room. Kuno sighed, and then dropped off the chair, stalking to her room and splaying herself out on the bed, huffing and closing her eyes. There was a tugging at her collar, and it was removed completely. Something thudded down on the bed beside her, and then she felt the concussion of the door to her room closing. After a few moments, Kuno opened her eyes to find a new collar staying beside her on the bed, a key red collar with a bell on it. The changeling sighed faintly, scooping the collar closer to herself, and batting at the bell in a depressed way. She couldn't hear it jingling. It took her only a few moments to get the collar on and fasten it into place. There was no padlock on it, but she guessed that warden would add one the next time she was to be taken out of her room. Kuno sighed and pulled herself over to a desk, selecting a book and began flicking through it, batting at her new bell in a glum way. At least now she had an indicator of how her hearing was returning, if it would ever return. Not that it would matter if she didn't find a way out of here. If it didn't find a way out of there. In a week, maybe more if she continued to get regular meals, she would be dead. And that is it for chapter 2 of An Affliction of the Heart. This story was by an anonymous Pegasus. Check his shit out, yo. Links are in the first chapter. And the first chapter description. Nightlife, out.